I've been an entrepreneur since I can remember. I've been an entrepreneur really my early years, 5 years old, selling figs in Mexico City.
Welcome to the Latino Engine podcast, where we honor the stories that move us, the voices that ground us, and the moments that remind us just how powerful we really are. I'm your host, Carlos Martin. In this episode, I had the honor of sitting down with Jacqueline Ruiz. I'll be honest, her story didn't just inspire me, it moved me. She took us on a journey from selling figs as a child in Mexico City to surviving cancer at 21, to building legacy through storytelling, publishing an unwavering belief in herself and others. This one is for the dreamers, the builders, and the ones still trying to figure it out. Let's roll the show.
City, but I became an official entrepreneur in the land of dreams when I was 23 years old. I started a marketing communications agency specializing in public relations. And to this day, that the public relations aspect is one of the core competencies that we have as an agency, including doing PR for other digital marketing agencies. So that has been just an amazing journey, almost 20 years as an entrepreneur with JJR marketing. And then I went through two bouts of, cancer when I was 21 and pre-cancer when I was 23 that led to the entire reconstruction of my digestive system. And, the prognosis was either I died in those next 2 weeks or I was fed up a tube for the rest of my life. And, but my desire to live, and especially because I just started my first company, was bigger than me. And I remember the doctor walking away and said, I just have one question, doctor. I need to know if you can let me get out by next Thursday between 8:30 and 8:45 because I have finals. I'm graduating with honors.
Oh my
So
God.
she just told me that I might die. And I'm like, that's not a question. I had a 5-month-old baby about to graduate college. Imagine that. The sense of the activation that happened within me, the sense of urgency to create, to like, we sometimes in business, we're like, oh, we have all the time in the world, to do stuff or, I wanted to write a book. I'm like, I don't have all the time in the world and I want my children to know who I am.
It stemmed from a sort of legacy, if you will, of who you are.
And my
Wow.
dream was one book, right? Well, that leads me to publish one book. And then people are like, oh, you have an amazing story. And my husband notices that I'm spending quite a lot of time giving people advice because, I'm like less than 30 years old and I'm doing all this stuff and I'm already, I already had 7 books and they're like, wow. My husband's like, I think you're spending a lot of time giving people advice for books. I'm like, of course, I love it. I mean, I love helping people. I'm an open book. Like, let's do this. He's like, I think you're becoming the Mother Teresa of book publishing advice. So
I love
that
that.
to me became my milestone. I said, okay, well, I think publishing is choosing me. So I created a publishing company 11 years ago as a way to have a separate container. So I'm like, if I ever sell JJR marketing, and my exit plan, I don't want that revenue to be part of the EBITDA. So then I created a separate entity that became this well-known worldwide publishing company 11 years ago. And now I have 37 of my own books and I have over
37.
500.
Yikes.
Yes. From one. Can you believe that? This is what
What do
happens when a book chooses you.
What do you mean from one? They just kind of stem from that one. That one.
From the idea of like, I just want to be a one-time author. Like I want to have one book so my children know who I am, to now 37 of my own books. But what has been fascinating is that I've also published over 500 books for authors in 34 countries. And not only that, many of those, close to 100 of those books are anthologies, which means they're a collection of stories, which means that each book has between 10 to 100 stories, predominantly of stories of Latinos and predominantly Latinas.
I love that. So tell me a little bit more. So you're saying there's stories within the book besides the author?
Yeah, so an anthology is a collection of stories that create a relevance for a specific vertical. So, for example, I first started doing a series called Today's Inspired Latina. My goal was to do one book, have 10 women share their story, pitch in, with the book cost, and then, me with my marketing background, just like put them on the map, right? And it was like almost like a book with a marketing plan, with a marketing magical, thing. So that series became a series of 10 because, and I never put volume one in one because it was just going to be one book, right? And that was my seventh book. But it became this phenomenon that took us to Europe, took me to Dubai, took me to Central America. It got me awards. The New York Times has sponsored us for events 3 times in New York.
Oh,
I
wow.
recorded
Amazing.
over 300 Latina talks with that, almost 250 authors that share their stories from 26 countries. And it became this thing. So then I did Today's Inspired Young Latina. That became 5 volumes. I did Today's Inspired Leader, another 5 volumes. So imagine just the aggregate amount of those books that they were under me. But then I came up with the idea when I got my pilot's license, when I started flying 11 years
Oh, wait
ago.
a minute. And you're also a pilot.
Yes.
I love how you just kind of sprinkle that in. It's like, oh, wow,
Like,
that's impressive.
ta-da! But it's amazing because for all of you watching, I want you to think of those milestones and those micro moments, as I call them, when you get an inspiration, and you get them in business, you get them in life, you get them in your personal life. But, to be alert when you get those inspirations. Because for me, it was like, again, that sense of urgency to live and to serve from what I had experienced. My husband originally wanted to get his pilot's license, but the plane was really too small for him. He's 6'3". I was like, I love this, but more from the perspective of like, I felt like I was closer to heaven, closer to God, so that when I had a prayer, especially with everything I had experienced, it would get there faster, So I was like, this is kind of cool. Like, no doors on the plane. We're 3,000, 5,000 feet up. Like, I love this. And then I had the divine download of getting my license. So then I'm like, wow, what if I combined my marketing background, the passion of activating hearts and minds to provoke action? That's how I define marketing. Then I'm like, books. Books have changed my life. People come up to me and say, you changed my life in page 2 of your book. I'm like, well, I did? How? Like it was bedazzled. Like I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, in aviation, there's not a lot of Latina pilots. There's not a lot of pilotinas. I made up a word, right? Because there's no. And
Wait, what
that's
word
when
was that? I missed that. What's the word you made up?
pilotina, Latina
Pilotina.
pilot. So then I'm like, you know what? What if I collect the stories of these women? So that became my book number 17. It was a collection of 22 women in aviation. It took me 9 months to find them, including a former NASA chief engineer. And I wrote that book, Latinas in Aviation. And a friend of mine said, well, if you're a pilotina, then I'm an architina. I'm like, oh, what did I just start?
Yeah, you just started a whole
So
new, yeah.
she's like, let's do a book, Latinas in Architecture. Oh, and then another woman, let's do Latinas in real estate. Let's do Latinas in construction, Latinas in VC, Latinas in social work, Latinas in nursing, Latinas in education, Latinas in law enforcement, Latinas in never ending. So I have,
Yeah.
unbelievable. That's how the thousands and thousands and thousands, because every single one of those books has between 15 to 25 on average. Then I did another series for a diplomat. Just with her series alone, I have over 500 stories of some of the most powerful Latinos in this country, and it's
Wow.
called Hispanic Stars Rising. So
Yeah. That's amazing. I love your story because there's so much there. Obviously from your medical condition that you had, and then for me is going from a scarcity mindset to an abundant mindset, because a lot of people, they could have gotten stuck there and said, my life is over. And you chose otherwise. You took a different route, and then you wrote one book and then the other. And most people, including myself, we probably can't even think about and fathom the success that you've had. And so what is your, I guess, recommendation or words of wisdom that you could share with someone to say, just one step at a time, what book at a time? Unless you already had that vision planned out and that's what you had, or that just happened organically.
organically, totally organically. And you know what? It's interesting because as a pilot, I'm always thinking about, okay, what if the engine quits? What if something happens with it? So I have to always have a flight plan. But it's interesting because between the marketing agency and the publishing house, it's like I have lived my life, my personal life, in a like without a flight plan. I get guided by my divine downloads and inspirations. And I can tell you that when those come to me and I present that to a client, sometimes it's in the form of a new campaign idea or a new book or a title, the clarity of the title of the book. And I pay very close attention to those, and I think that in business and in life, the more intuitive that we are, the more in tune that we are with our purpose, for me is elevate women.
So you mentioned something really important that you said, what if the engine quits? So as an executive coach, we talk about the scarcity mindset versus abundant mindset, and we get to choose what we think about and what we focus on. So yes, can the engine quit? Yes, but I'm pretty confident that's not what you think. So what do you do to shift when you're up in the air and your brain tells you the engine quits? What do you do to say otherwise?
Well, I always try to think of a bigger purpose. There's a beautiful little book called Men's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. He wrote this beautiful book, by the way, is one of the top three most sold books in history. Number one is the Bible. Number two is a series of Harry Potter. Number three is Viktor Frankl, Men's Search for Meaning. And essentially, this book talks about the importance of having a purpose that is bigger than you in order to help you overcome whatever adversities you're facing at that moment. So for me, it's like I think of like a very tough situation I had in the airplane in 2020, where I was flying. I was, lower end fuel because I'd been flying all day and it was beautiful. But then all of a sudden I found myself in a pretty strong turbulence with a light airplane, my teddy bear, myself. And I just I got so scared, unlike any other time. And I had already landed for 450 times by then. And I had had a lot of different, instructors and, that gave me different perspectives of life. And for me, when you get paralyzed or you are in doubt or you're in fear, which are the three enemies, according to Napoleon Hill, it's like you have to think like Viktor Frankl in a bigger purpose. So for me, it was like, in this moment, I'm feeling scared, like, and I don't know if I'm going to survive this. That's how it got to that point where I already said sorry to God for thinking of giving up, but it was very, very tough. I just remember looking at runway 27 in the midst of this crazy turbulence and just thinking, today I'm going to land to hug my kids. And that
Beautiful.
bigger vision, and I saw myself hugging my kids. I'm like, today, it's not going to be the end of this. So I literally just focused with all my might, with all my, and I was able to land because I created a bigger purpose that was bigger than what I was experiencing in that moment. So that's something that helps me always get to the other side. And one of my biggest mentors, Clark Weber, famous radio DJ and famous radio personality, said to me, everything you ever wanted is on the other side of fear. So that's what I do. I just keep flying.
So if we were to think about other people, when I'm talking to my clients and we have the imposter syndrome, somehow we tend to focus a lot on what can go wrong. The engine's going to quit, or people are going to see right through me. We're not good enough. But then you say, have a bigger vision. So what can someone do if they have imposter syndrome? Yeah, maybe not flying up in the air. What do you say to them?
The first thing I always say is, I believe in you. But do you believe in yourself? Right? That's like one of the epitome, a lot of people want to go to the depths of the ocean or the highest mountain to discover something. But I will say that the more that you get to know you as a leader, as an individual, as a person that is adding value to the community, the more that you get to know yourself as a pilot in command, and what triggers you, what excites you, what makes you upset, what makes you sad, what makes you, what is your language of love? What is your personality assessment? What does that, what under this quadrant, where are you? Any personality assessment test that can tell you more, give you more insight about you. Because the moment that you get to know yourself is the moment that you can be empowered and say, okay, you know what? I will avoid this type of situation, or maybe I'll figure out a way to handle the situation if it triggers me. And so it's super important, for a pilot, to stay present and to know that you have 20 things that you have to deal with and to make those extemporaneous decisions. So it might not be as dramatic for somebody on the earth, it might not be life and death, but it's more like, how do we, get to know ourselves? How do we package the value that we bring? And our core values, guided through our actions, are the most beautiful way to give us kind of our guiding light, our true north. That tells you who to associate with and who not to associate with if you see those flags. So it's, this amazing system that we have inside of us allows us to do so much more and go beyond what meets the eye. But that always goes back to getting to know yourself, packaging that value, and then providing that value to other people. Because I will tell you that you will find bounty, you will find the magic, you'll find the abundance when you exchange your talents and you package them up in a way that can make somebody else's process more efficient, more aligned, more magical, faster, quicker, more effective, that will always lead to abundance, and that will make you a millionaire. That will always happen. That's the way to flow and to really create economic impact, to share your story. All of that is kind of part of that same package. It's beautiful.
Getting to know oneself, believing in ourselves, bringing it back to self, in order for us to move forward and let that organically happen. And you'd be surprised. Look at you, right? From their doctor telling you that you may or may not live, and all of a sudden, look at where you are. I mean, that's just an incredible journey. So I wanted to shift here and say, seeing the Latino dollar only touching the one business within our community. What do you think? Why do you think that is, and how can we remedy that as an individual or as a community? Can we have that dollar go to 2 businesses, 3 businesses? What do you think the reason why it only touches only one Latino business and then it goes elsewhere?
Yeah, I think part of that is, creating awareness. Back in the day when I was studying marketing and this idea of like activating hearts and minds to provoke action, and the mind of a marketer is creating these ecosystems that allow people to, be noticed, right? And it used to take, 5 to 7 touch points, in maybe one different type of way. A touch point is basically anything that has your name on your logo. So you go to an event, that's a touch point. Anything, you give a little handout that has your logo, that's another touch point. So when you get to the 7th one, then people are like, oh, Carlos is an executive coach. Oh yeah. So the thing is that we're dealing with over the last decade is that now you need to be more creative than ever before in order for that money to flow. We need to create awareness. But in order to create awareness, we need to be more intentional than we used to be. Because now it's not just 5 to 7 points, but it's 5 to 7 points in multiple ways in order for people to even know that you exist. So this could be a third-party endorsement. It could be a media placement. It could be an ad on the paper. It could be an ad on social media. It could be an email blast. It could be an introduction. And then by then, oh, okay, now I know that Carlos does an executive coach. And then, what also happens is that if people had an okay experience with somebody, or, let's say they had a bad experience, working with another Latino business or any kind of business, right? The mind, our mind will gravitate towards sharing that with 8 people, without a doubt, creating a bad rep for that business, right?
Yeah.
And just because it wasn't perfection or whatever. So if they have an okay experience, they go in, it's like a transactional experience. They don't tell anybody. It's total,
Isn't that
it's like
funny
dormant.
how that works? The negative kind of it's almost more
It flows.
powerful. I don't know how that even works. Yeah, but you're
But
right.
but then if they have an extraordinary experience where they say, "Whoa, I like it blew my mind. I go, it's amazing," they will tell 2 people. I mean, but it's gotta be extraordinary. It cannot just be transactional or even an amazing encounter. I mean, it's gotta be like, wow. And then you gotta match up the quality. So I mean, there's all these different things, in order for us to live rent free in the minds and hearts of other people, for them to think about us when Somebody mentions books. Oh, Jackie. Executive coaching, Carlos. Oh, great. Leadership, Refugio, Robert, like part of that is how you're being intentional about creating your presence. How are you intercepting those touch points? What are you making people feel? When they mention your name, are people saying, oh my gosh, the best publisher, you got to work with her? Or is it, oh, you know what? I didn't have a good experience. I mean, I'm completely then blocked from that opportunity to connect with that business. So, a lot of it could be scientific and a lot of it could be more like, if you do the math, like get in front of more people, intentionally and make them feel like you got their best interest in mind, which is the definition of trust. So
Yeah.
I think it goes back to awareness. How do we
Okay.
create more awareness for us?
Yeah, thank you for that. That just kind of, it's so surprising. On the negative, they'll tell 8 people. On the positive, maybe 2 people if you're lucky. So wanted to shift a little bit here in regards to bringing awareness. You being a book publisher, how does that create visibility? How does that tie into someone and create visibility? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
There's actually something really cool that I teach, that sometimes like other businesses when they're trying to figure out their voice in their marketing sales process. And it's interesting because you basically move people down a funnel. And then what happens is that you do an amazing job, the quality funnels down. And then once you get to level 6, that you've done an amazing job and everything checks out from when they saw you. And then, it's like, oh, wow, they're amazing. After step number 6, they become an advocate for the brand. So that's when you can start seeing, okay, so now this person is down here, in level 6, and everything that had to take place for somebody to become level 6, from 1 to 6. And then they get down, and that's when they actively begin supporting that business. You see what I mean? So it's almost
Yeah.
like, how do we understand the marketing funnel? How do we understand the sales funnel? How do we understand, our different types of clients and potential clients, where you have your clients, those are your closest connections. To sell to them, it's a lot easier because they already know you, right? But then you have the next level of prospects. These are people that have a need. They know they need something, but they don't know that that something is you. So they have a need. Sometimes they don't even know they have a need. So then you gotta create the need and then allow them to become aware that you're the answer to that need. So to get that kind of client, it takes you 7 times. It's 7 times more expensive to get to that than to upsell and cross-sell an existing client. So you got to look at economies of scale, right? It's like, okay, where do I want to grow? What is the path to least resistance? But then you have a third circle, concentric circle, which is more strategic alliances. And these are people that will never buy from you, but they are amazing witnesses to the needs that other people have and that you can be the solution to that need. But you know what? Not a lot of people are creating and building and nurturing relationships with strategic alliances because to them it's a waste of time. I mean, I want to go straight to the sale, right? And how do we create that engine with Latinos to understand sales, understand marketing, understanding the onboarding process, understanding how you go from a prospect that took you 7 touch points to turn an existing client, and then get them through the funnel and for them to become an advocate. So now they're an engine referral, a referral partner.
Yeah.
It's like the most beautiful thing.
There's so much there. The beauty of an entrepreneur, right? We have to put on so many hats. And I love that because it's creating depth for ourselves. So one last thing here for you, Jackie, if you could go back and speak to yourself, a younger self, and when you were just getting started, what would you tell her?
I would say everything will be okay. From that place of scarcity, from the place of, diving into amazing books, amazing literature that changed my life, unbeknownst to me, that set me on a path of resilience, set me on a path of, just vision, of knowing that everything was going to be okay. Even though, I wasn't 100% sure, but I would go back and tell that little girl, Like everything will turn out, everything will be okay. If you keep on this path, if you keep leading with your core values, if you keep being transparent, if you keep helping and serving other people and help enough people achieve their dreams, just like Zig Ziglar said,
Mm-hmm.
your dreams will be achieved. You know, and
Mm-hmm.
I've achieved every dream that I've ever had. And sometimes I had a dream of one book. I'm 37. I had a dream of buying a few, one property by the ocean. I had, my husband and I have purchased five. You know, it's like, one business. Well, I have two. One nonprofit. Well, I have two. One. It's like, you know, be ready for that.
Mm-hmm.
But everything is gonna be okay.
Thank you for that inner wisdom. I just, it just tells me to just keep believing in, in ourselves. And like you said, even if you're not 100%, that's okay. Just keep going.
And never
Jackie,
give up.
thank you. Yeah, I love it. Never give up. Even if there's a quote that I heard is like, even if you, what does it say? Believe in yourself. Even if you don't believe in yourself, believe in yourself. So just keep going. Jacqueline, thank you so much for your inner wisdom, your insights, and what you do, and I thank you. I think we need more people like yourselves, and thank you again for your time. I'll put links on where to follow you on LinkedIn and social media and so forth. And Jackie, thank you again.
Plus, I think you're making waves in our community, and thank you for creating a beautiful space to elevate our stories. Thank you.